I never thought my own son would look at me the way Ethan did that night, like I was a stranger, or worse, a traitor. "I know what you did in the military, Mom," he said, his voice cold, shaking just enough to tell me this had been eating him alive.
"How could you lie to me about this?
"You lied to me my whole
everything.
life."
You knew the whole
My
time
heart
and you
stopped.
said nothing."
30 years of silence, shattered in a single sentence. Before I could even find the words to defend myself, the front door creaked open behind him. And the last man I ever expected to see again, Colonel James Carter, stepped inside. "That's not the truth, son," he said. And just like that, everything I had buried was about to come back. If you've ever had someone you love turn against you without knowing the full story, I hope you'll stay with me. And if this story touches, you don't forget to like, subscribe, and share where you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Tell me, what would you do if your child believed the worst about you? I live in a small, quiet house just outside Columbus, Ohio. It's the kind of place people move to when they want life to slow down. Tree-lined streets, neighbors who wave from their porches, and mornings that begin with the soft hum of coffee brewing instead of chaos. For most people, it would feel peaceful. For me, it often felt too quiet. I've been a retired nurse for nearly 5 years now. After decades of long shifts, emergencies, and the constant pressure of life and death decisions, I thought I would welcome the silence. And at first I did. I filled my days with gardening, volunteering at the local clinic, and reading books I never had time for. But silence has a way of making memories louder, especially the ones you've spent your whole life trying to forget. Ethan used to fill this house with noise. Even as an adult, he'd stop by unexpectedly sometimes, just to raid my fridge. Sometimes just to sit at the kitchen table and talk about work, about life, about nothing at all. He had his father's smile, though I tried not to think about that too much. Lately, though, something had changed. At first, it was subtle. A missed Sunday visit. A shorter phone call. A distracted tone in his voice. "Everything okay, honey?" I had asked him one evening over the phone. "Yeah, Mom. Just busy," he replied quickly. Too quickly. I remember standing there in my kitchen holding the phone a little longer after he hung up, staring at nothing. A mother knows when something is wrong. It's not always something you can explain. It's just a feeling that settles deep in your chest and refuses to go away. And mine wasn't going anywhere. Weeks passed, and the distance between us grew wider. Ethan stopped dropping by altogether. When I texted, his replies were polite, but distant. When I called, he often let it go to voicemail. And when he did answer, his voice felt guarded. Like he was choosing his words carefully. Like he didn't trust himself to say too much. I told myself it was work stress. He had always been ambitious, always pushing himself too hard. As an engineer, he carried responsibilities I didn't fully understand, but I respected them. Still, this felt different. This didn't feel like stress. This felt like resentment. One afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Collins, my neighbor, while watering the front garden. "Haven't seen Ethan around lately." This didn't feel like stress. This felt like resentment. One afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Collins, my neighbor, while watering the front garden. "Haven't seen Ethan around lately," she said casually, adjusting her sun hat. "Everything all right?" I forced a smile. "Oh, you know how kids are. Busy lives." She nodded, but there was a look in her eyes that made my stomach tighten, because I knew she could feel it too. Something wasn't right. That night, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at an empty chair across from me. It had been Ethan's spot for years. Even when he moved out, he would always sit there when he visited. I reached out, brushing my fingers lightly against the wood. "You're imagining things, Bradley," I whispered to myself. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. A few days later, I decided to stop waiting. I drove to Ethan's apartment unannounced. The whole way there, my heart pounded harder than it should have. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I would knock on his door, he would smile, and everything would go back to normal. But when he opened the door, nothing about his face was normal. He looked surprised, and then something else, something colder. "Mom," he said, not warmly, not angrily, just flat. I was in the neighborhood. I lied, forcing a small laugh. "Thought I'd check on you." He hesitated before stepping aside to let me in. That hesitation, it cut deeper than anything he could have said. His apartment was neat, almost too neat, everything in its place. No signs of chaos, no signs of stress, just order. But the air between us felt anything but orderly. We sat down across from each other, and for a moment neither of us spoke. "I haven't heard from you much," I finally said softly. "Yeah. Work's been a lot," he replied, avoiding my eyes. There it was again. That distance. That wall. I studied him carefully. The tightness in his jaw. The way his hands were clasped together, like he was holding something back. "Ethan," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. Did I do something? For a split second, something flickered in his eyes. Pain. Anger. Then it disappeared. "No," he said quickly. "It's not you." But it was. I could feel it. I just didn't know why. I left shortly after that. The conversation went nowhere, circling around empty words and polite silence. As I drove home, the weight in my chest grew heavier with every mile. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the past few months. Every conversation, every look, every silence, and then a thought crept in. One I had spent decades avoiding. What if he knew I sat up abruptly, my heart racing? No, that was impossible. There was no way Ethan could know about my past. I had buried it too deeply, locked it away so tightly that even I rarely allowed myself to think about it. To him, I had always been just his mother, a nurse, a widow, a woman who had lost her husband, Michael Reed, before Ethan was old enough to remember him. That was the story I had told, the only story I had ever allowed. But what if something had surfaced? What if someone had talked? What if the past I had sacrificed everything to hide had finally found its way back? The next morning, I walked out to my mailbox trying to shake the feeling. Bills, advertisements, and then one envelope that made my breath catch. No return address, just my name. Bradley Whitman, written in a handwriting I hadn't seen in decades. My fingers trembled as I held it, because deep down, I already knew. The past wasn't just coming back. It was already here. I didn't open the letter right away. Instead, I stood there in my kitchen, staring at it like it might burn through my hands if I held it too long. The handwriting alone was enough to send a chill down my spine, sharp, controlled, unmistakable. Colonel James Carter. 30 years. 30 years since I had last seen that name, since I had forced myself to forget it. I told myself I should throw it away, that whatever was inside that envelope belonged to a life I had already paid for in full. But deep down, I knew something had already shifted. Ethan's distance, his coldness, that look in his eyes. This wasn't a coincidence. With trembling fingers, I finally tore the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Short, direct. Just like the man who wrote it. Bradley. If you're reading this, it means the truth is already finding its way back to you. We need to talk. For your sake and for your son's. Carter. My breath caught. For your sons. That was all it took. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about me anymore. I folded the letter carefully, almost mechanically, my mind already racing ahead. I needed to find Ethan. I needed to understand what he knew, what he thought he knew, before everything spiraled further out of control. But I didn't have to go looking for him. Because that evening, he came to me. I heard the front door open just after sunset. No knock. No hesitation. That alone told me everything. Mom, Ethan's voice called out sharp and controlled. I stepped into the living room slowly, my heart pounding harder with every step. He was standing in the middle of the room, shoulders tense, jaw tight. And in his hands was a folder. Thick, worn, official. My stomach dropped before he even spoke. I think it's time we stop pretending, he said. There was no warmth in his voice, no trace of the boy I had raised, only anger and something worse, disappointment. Ethan, I began trying to steady my voice. What is this? He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You tell me. He tossed the folder onto the coffee table. The sound echoed louder than it should have. I didn't move at first, because I already knew what was inside. Slowly, I stepped forward and opened it. Military documents, stamped, signed, official. My name, Bradley Whitman, printed in bold letters across the top. I hadn't seen those papers in decades, but they had never truly left me. Ethan's voice cut through the silence. Discharged under suspicious circumstances, he read aloud, each word hitting like a hammer. Possible breach of operational security. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. There it was. The version of the story the world had believed. The version I had allowed. You told me you were a nurse. He continued, his voice rising. You told me you left the military because you wanted a normal life. You never said anything about this. I swallowed hard. I was trying to protect you. Protect me! He snapped, his eyes blazing. From what? The truth? I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the pain behind his anger. He wasn't just accusing me. He was hurting, and somehow I had caused it. I didn't lie, I said softly. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing, Mom, he shouted. The word Mom felt different now, sharper, like it didn't belong to me anymore. He started pacing, running a hand through his hair. I went to someone, he said suddenly. My heart skipped. Who, I asked quietly. A man named Kyle Brennan, he replied. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. Sergeant Kyle Brennan. Of course. If anyone would talk, it would be him. Ethan continued, his voice trembling with emotion. He served with you. He remembers everything. I felt my hands go cold. And what did he tell you, I asked, though I already knew. Ethan stopped pacing and turned to face me. He said you betrayed your unit, he said, his voice breaking. That people died because of you. Silence filled the room. Heavy. Suffocating. I couldn't breathe. Not because what he said was new, but because hearing it from my son, it broke something inside me. Is it true? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper now. That question. That simple, devastating question. I had spent 30 years avoiding it, running from it, burying it. And now here it was, standing in front of me, looking at me with eyes that used to trust me completely. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. There were 1,000 words I could have said, 1,000 explanations, 1,000 pieces of truth, but none of them would change what he had already seen, what he had already believed. My voice cracked. It's complicated. Ethan let out a hollow laugh. That's your answer, he said. People died, and your answer is, it's complicated. I flinched, because he wasn't wrong, not from his perspective. I can't explain everything, I said quietly. Why not? He demanded. Because if I do, it will destroy everything you think you know. Because if I do, you'll have to face who your father really was. Because if I do, I lose you either way. But I couldn't say any of that. So I did the only thing I had done for the past 30 years. I stayed silent. Ethan stared at me waiting, hoping, begging in his own way for me to prove him wrong. And when I didn't, something in his eyes changed. The last piece of trust he had left shattered. Wow, he whispered. That one word hurt more than anything else he had said. I defended you. He continued, his voice shaking. When I found this, I told myself there had to be an explanation. That my mom wouldn't do something like that. Tears blurred my vision. But you won't even deny it, he said. I couldn't, because denying it would be another lie, and I had already taken too much from him. I'm sorry, I whispered. His expression hardened instantly. Sorry, he repeated. That's all you have to say. I took a step toward him. Ethan, please. No, he said firmly, stepping back. The distance between us felt like miles. I don't even know who you are, he said. Those words, they cut deeper than any accusation. I raised you, I said, my voice trembling. I loved you every single day of your life. Maybe he replied coldly. But I don't know what else you're capable of anymore. The room felt like it was closing in on me. Everything I had built, everything I had sacrificed. It was slipping away right in front of me. I need time, he said finally, his voice quieter now, but no less distant. Ethan, I said, I need time. He grabbed the folder, hesitated for just a second, then dropped it back onto the table. Keep it, he said. It's yours anyway. And with that, he turned and walked out. The door slammed behind him. And just like that, I was alone again. But this time, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. Because now the past wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to him too, and I had no idea how to take it back. That night, after Ethan walked out of my house, I didn't cry. Not at first. I just stood there in the living room, staring at the door like it might open again. Like he might come back and say he didn't mean it. Like we could rewind the last hour and pretend none of it had happened. But the door stayed closed, and the silence that followed, it felt different now, heavier, colder. I slowly sank into the couch, my eyes drifting back to the folder he had left behind. The same folder I had once believed would never resurface. 30 years. I had buried that life so deeply, I almost convinced myself it had never existed. Almost. My fingers brushed against the edge of the papers, and just like that, the memories came rushing back. Not gently, not gradually, but all at once, like a storm breaking through a dam. I was 28 years old when I first stepped onto that base in the Middle East, young enough to still believe in ideals, old enough to understand the cost of them. The heat hit me first, dry, relentless, wrapping around my body like a second skin. The air smelled of sand oil and something metallic I could never quite place. Lieutenant Whitman. I turned to see a man approaching me, his uniform crisp, despite the conditions, his posture sharp. "Sergeant Kyle Brennan?" he said, offering a firm handshake. Even back then, there was something about him I didn't trust, not something I could prove. Just a feeling. "Welcome to the unit," he added, his smile polite but distant. I nodded. "Glad to be here." That was the truth. At least it was then. I had worked for years to earn that rank. I believed in what we were doing. I believed in the people I served with. And then there was him, Michael Reed. I met him later that day near the supply tent. He was leaning against a crate talking to another soldier, but when he saw me, his entire expression changed. He smiled. Not polite, not distant, real. "You must be the new lieutenant," he said, walking over. "Bradley Whitman," I replied. "Michael Reed," he said, extending his hand. The moment our hands met, something shifted. I didn't understand it at the time. Maybe I didn't want to. But looking back now, that was the moment everything began. Michael wasn't like the others. Where Brennan was controlled, Michael was easygoing. Where the base felt tense, Michael made it feel. But looking back now, that was the moment everything began. Michael wasn't like the others. Where Brennan was controlled, Michael was easygoing. Where the base felt tense, Michael made it feel human. We started talking, then laughing, then something more. It wasn't immediate. War doesn't allow for that kind of simplicity. But in the quiet moments between missions, we found each other. And for a while, it felt like we were holding on to something real, in a place built on uncertainty. Our unit had one primary assignment: protect the convoy route. It sounded simple on paper. It never was. Every movement had to be calculated. Every detail mattered. One mistake, one leak of information, and lives could be lost. We all knew that. We all lived with that. Which is why, when things started to feel off, I noticed. It was small at first. Too small for anyone else to take seriously. Enemy movements that didn't make sense. Attacks that came too close to our planned routes. Timing that felt too precise. Probably just coincidence, Brennan said when I brought it up during a briefing. But Michael didn't agree. "I've seen this before," he said quietly later that night. "Someone's feeding them information." The word hung between us. Inside. A leak. I remember the way my stomach tightened when he said it. Because deep down, I had already been thinking the same thing. "If that's true," I said, lowering my voice, "we need proof." Michael nodded. "And we need to be careful who we trust." Those words would stay with me longer than anything else he ever said. The days that followed were tense. Every glance felt suspicious. Every conversation felt guarded. I started paying closer attention, not just to the enemy, but to my own team. And that's when I saw it. A pattern. Subtle. Hidden. But there. Someone was accessing route information before it was finalized. Someone who shouldn't have had that level of clearance. I brought it to Brennan. He dismissed it. Again. "You're overthinking it, Lieutenant," he said. "We're all under pressure." Maybe I was. Maybe I wasn't. But I couldn't ignore it. Not when lives were on the line. So I kept digging. Quietly. Carefully. Even Michael didn't know how far I had gone, because by then I wasn't sure who I could trust. The night everything fell apart started like any other. The convoy was scheduled to move at dawn. We had finalized the route hours earlier. Everything had been double-checked, triple-checked. There was no room for error, or at least the night everything fell apart started like any other. The convoy was scheduled to move at dawn. We had finalized the route hours earlier. Everything had been double-checked, triple-checked. There was no room for error, or at least there shouldn't have been. I remember standing outside the command tent staring out into the darkness. The desert was silent, almost eerily so. Michael walked up beside me. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "I just have a bad feeling," I admitted. He didn't laugh, didn't dismiss it. He just stood there with me. "You trust me?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. "Of course I do," I said without hesitation. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was trying to memorize my face. "Good," he said softly. At the time, I didn't understand why he asked. Now, I wish I had. The attack came just before sunrise. Fast, precise, devastating. They knew exactly where we would be, exactly when. Gunfire erupted from both sides of the route. Explosions tore through the convoy. Chaos. Screaming. Orders shouted over the sound of bullets. Everything we feared happening all at once. I remember diving behind a vehicle, my ears ringing, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "This isn't random," someone yelled. No, it wasn't. It couldn't be. This was planned. Which meant only one thing. We had been betrayed. And in that moment, as everything burned around me, I realized something that would change my life forever. The enemy didn't just know the route. They knew everything. Which meant the leak wasn't just real. It was close. Closer than I had ever imagined. The first explosion knocked the air out of my lungs. 1 second, we were moving in formation. The convoy steady, disciplined, exactly as planned. The next, everything was fire. The blast came from the left side of the road, flipping the lead vehicle onto its side. Metal screamed as it twisted flames, swallowing it whole before anyone inside could even react. "Ambush," someone shouted. Gunfire erupted, instantly sharp, relentless, coming from both sides of the ridge. They had us surrounded. They knew exactly where to hit, exactly how to break us. "Take cover!" I yelled, dropping behind the nearest vehicle as bullets tore through the air above me. The world became noise, explosions, screams. Commands shouted over chaos. Training took over, but even through it, something felt wrong. This wasn't just an attack. This was precision, calculated. Every move they made anticipated ours. "They're targeting the rear," Brennan shouted over the comms. "They know our formation." Of course they did, because someone had told them. I scanned the area trying to locate my team through the smoke and dust. "Michael," I shouted. No response. My heart slammed harder against my C-Hest. Michael responded static. Then I scanned the area trying to locate my team through the smoke and dust. "Michael!" I shouted. No response. My heart slammed harder against my chest. Michael responded static. "Then I'm here!" His voice crackled through strained, but alive. "We're pinned on the east side." Relief hit me so fast it almost knocked me off balance. "Hold position," I ordered. "We're coming to you." But even as I said it, I knew it wouldn't be that simple. Nothing about this was. Another explosion rocked the ground closer this time. The vehicle beside me shuddered its windows, shattering outward. A soldier screamed, shattering outward. A soldier screamed somewhere behind me. I turned, crawling through the dirt toward the sound. Private Ellis. He was down, clutching his leg, blood soaking through his uniform. "I've got you somewhere behind me." I turned, crawling through the dirt toward the sound. Private Ellis. He was down, clutching his leg, blood soaking through his uniform. "I've got you," I said, grabbing him under the arms and dragging him behind cover. "You're okay. Stay with me." His face was pale eyes wide with fear. They knew he whispered. They knew exactly where we'd be. I didn't respond. Because I couldn't. Because he was right. And we both knew it. Minutes felt like hours. We fought back as best we could, returning fire, trying to stabilize the situation. But we were outmaneuvered, outplanned, outmatched. This wasn't a random strike. This was a trap. Lieutenant Brennan's voice cut through the chaos again. "We need to fall back." "No," I snapped instinctively. "We still have men out there. Then they're already lost." He shot back. "We can't stay here." The words hit me like a slap, because part of me knew he was right. But I couldn't accept it. Not yet. Not while Michael was still out there. "I'm going to get them," I said. "Whitman, that's an order," I cut him off. "I'll take responsibility." But I couldn't accept it. Not yet. Not while Michael was still out there. "I'm going to get them," I said. "Whitman, that's an order." I cut him off. "I'll take responsibility." Before he could argue further, I moved. Every step felt like running through fire bullets snapping past me, sand kicking up around my boots, the air thick with smoke and heat. I pushed forward anyway. Because I wasn't leaving them behind. Because I wasn't leaving him behind. I found Michael behind a damaged Humvee firing toward the ridge. When he saw me, his eyes widened. "What are you doing here?" he shouted. "Getting you out," I replied. He shook his head immediately. "It is too late. We need to pull back. Not without you," I said firmly. For a moment, we just stared at each other, the world burning around us. Then something changed in his expression. Something I didn't understand at the time. "Bradley?" he said, quieter now. There was something in his voice. Something heavy. Something final. "Listen to me," he continued. "You need to go back. No, you need to go back now." "I'm not leaving you," I shouted. Another explosion hit nearby, throwing both of us off balance. He grabbed my arm, pulling me closer. "You trust me, right?" he said again. The same question, the same tone, but this time it felt different, more urgent, more desperate. "Of course I do," I said, my voice shaking. He nodded slowly. "Then listen to me," he said. "Get everyone out. Don't wait for me." My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" But before, what are you talking about? But before He could answer. Gunfire intensified. Closer. Too close. "They're advancing," someone yelled over the comms. "We were running out of time." Michael's grip tightened on my arm. "Go, Ree!" he could answer. Gunfire intensified. Closer. Too close. "They're advancing," someone yelled over the comms. We were running out of time. Michael's grip tightened on my arm. "Go," he said. "I'm not." "Go!" he shouted louder than I had ever heard him. For a split second, I hesitated. And that hesitation, it would haunt me for the rest of my life, because in that moment, I had a choice. Stay with him, or go back and save the others. And I chose to go. The retreat was chaotic, disorganized, painful. We lost more people on the way back. Too many. By the time we reached a secure position, the convoy was destroyed, the mission a failure. And Michael? He never made it back. At least, that's what I told myself. At least that's what I told everyone. The aftermath was worse than the attack, because once the smoke cleared, the questions began. How did the enemy know who leaked the information? Why were they so precise? The investigation started almost immediately. Every report, every communication, every detail was examined. And it didn't take long for the suspicion to fall on me. I had access to the route information. I had raised concerns beforehand. I had broken protocol by leaving my assigned position. And most importantly, I had been the last person seen with Michael Reed. "He's missing," Brennan said during one of the early debriefings. And she was with him. The implication was clear. Too clear. "You think I had something to do with this?" I asked, my voice steady despite everything. "I think the evidence speaks for itself," he replied coldly. Evidence. That word again. Always evidence. Never truth. They questioned me for hours. Days. Over and over again. Every answer I gave wasn't enough. Every explanation twisted into something else. Why did you leave your post to retrieve wounded soldiers? Why were you with Reed? He was part of my team. Why did the enemy know your movements? I don't know, but I did. At least part of me did. I just couldn't prove it. Not yet. And the one person who could have helped me was gone. Or at least that's what everyone believed. The official report came weeks later. The wording was careful, calculated, just like everything else. Operational compromise due to internal breach. Primary suspect, Lieutenant Bradley Whitman. I remember reading those words and feeling nothing. No anger, no shock, just emptiness. Because deep down, I had already known this was coming. What I didn't expect was what came next. They told me Michael Reed was dead, killed during the ambush, body unrecovered, declared KIA, killed in action. Those 3 words. They were supposed to bring closure. Instead, they shattered me, because something inside me refused to believe it, refused to accept that he was just gone. Without answers, without explanation, without the truth. And as I stood there, holding that report in my hands, watching my entire life collapse around me, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just losing my career. I wasn't just losing my name. I was about to lose everything, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. The courtroom didn't look like the ones you see in movies. There were no dramatic speeches, no emotional outbursts, no last-minute revelations that changed everything. Just cold lights, hard chairs, and faces that had already decided who I was before I even walked in. I sat at the defense table, my hands folded tightly in front of me, trying to keep them from trembling. My uniform was still crisp, still carrying the rank I had worked so hard to earn. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like something I was about to lose. Across the room, the panel of officers sat in silence, their expressions unreadable. To them, this wasn't personal. It was procedure, a case, an outcome waiting to be finalized. But to me, this was everything. My name, my future, my truth. Or at least the version of it I was willing to tell. Lieutenant Bradley Whitman, the presiding officer, began his voice steady and formal. "You are here to answer charges related to the compromise of a military operation resulting in loss of life. How do you plead?" The room seemed to hold its breath. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, waiting, judging. I swallowed hard. "Not guilty," I said. The words felt strange leaving my mouth, because they were both true and incomplete. The prosecution moved quickly. They had their narrative, and they weren't going to let anything disrupt it. They laid out the timeline, the convoy route, the ambush, the casualties. Every detail was presented with clinical precision. Then came the part that mattered, the part where everything turned toward me. Lieutenant Whitman had access to classified route information, the prosecutor stated. She raised concerns about potential leaks prior to the mission, which suggests prior knowledge. I clenched my jaw. They twisted everything. Concern became suspicion. Awareness became guilt. She deviated from her assigned position during the attack. He continued. And she was last seen with Sergeant Michael Reed, who is now deceased. There it was. The connection. The implication. The accusation without needing to say the word. Traitor. My attorney, a quiet older man assigned to me just days before, leaned in slightly. Stay calm, he whispered. Calm. I almost laughed, but I stayed silent because that's what I had learned to do. Stay silent. Then they called their first key witness, Sergeant Kyle Brennan. Of course they did. I watched as he walked to the stand, his posture as rigid as ever, his expression composed, controlled, just like I remembered. He didn't look at me at first, but when he did, there was no hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. Sergeant Brennan, the prosecutor began, can you describe Lieutenant Whitman's behavior leading up to the incident? Brennan nodded. She was different, he said, distracted, questioning things that didn't need to be questioned. I felt a bitter taste rise in my throat. I had been trying to protect them, and now that was being used against me. Did you find her actions suspicious? The prosecutor asked. Yes, Brennan replied without pause. The word echoed in the room, sharp, final. And during the attack, she abandoned her assigned position, he said. She made independent decisions that compromised our ability to respond effectively. That wasn't true. Not completely, but it didn't matter, because it sounded convincing, and that was enough. Did you believe there was a breach of information within the unit? The prosecutor continued. Yes. And in your professional opinion, who was responsible? The room went still. Even the air felt heavier. Brennan didn't hesitate. Lieutenant Bradley Whitman. There it was. Not suspicion, not possibility. Certainty. He said it like a fact, like something that had already been proven. I felt something inside me crack. Not visibly, not outwardly, but deep enough that I knew I would never be the same again. My attorney stood for cross-examination. Sergeant Brennan, he began carefully, is it possible that the breach came from another source? Brennan shook his head. No. Is it possible that Lieutenant Whitman's actions during the attack were an attempt to rescue fellow soldiers? A pause. Brief. Calculated. Anything is possible, Brennan said. But her actions did not follow protocol. Protocol? Another word that sounded heavier than it should. Did you personally witness her leaking information? My attorney asked. No, Brennan admitted, but based on the evidence, he didn't need to finish. The implication was already there. My attorney sat down, and just like that, the damage was done. They called more witnesses, more testimonies, more carefully constructed pieces of a story that made sense. A story where I was the center, the cause, the reason everything had gone wrong. And through it all, I said nothing. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because what I had to say would change everything. There was a moment, one moment, when I could have stopped it. When I could have stood up and told them everything, every detail, every suspicion, every truth I had uncovered in those final hours before the attack. I could have told them about the pattern, the access logs, the inconsistencies, and most importantly, I could have told them about Michael, about the look in his eyes that night, about the question he asked me. Do you trust me? I could have told them why that question mattered. I could have told them what I had started to realize, just seconds before everything fell apart. But I didn't, Because saying it out loud would have destroyed more than just him. It would have destroyed everything. Everything Ethan would one day believe about his father. Everything I had promised myself I would protect, even if it meant sacrificing myself. "Lieutenant Whitman," the presiding officer said, pulling me back to the present. "You have the opportunity to make a statement in your defense." This was it. My chance. My last chance. The room was silent, waiting. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. Say it. Tell them the truth. End this. I stood slowly. Every movement felt heavier than it should. I looked at the panel, then at the room. Then for just a brief moment, I closed my eyes, and I saw him. Michael. The way he looked at me that night, the way he told me to go, the way he asked me to trust him. And I made my choice. "I have nothing to add," I said. The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through the room. My attorney turned toward me shocked. "Lieutenant?" But I shook my head. No, this was my decision, my burden, my silence. The presiding officer studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Very well. And just like that, the outcome was sealed. The verdict came quickly. Too quickly. Lieutenant Bradley Whitman is hereby discharged from service under conditions reflecting misconduct related to operational failure. Misconduct. Not traitor. Not officially. But close enough. Close enough that it would follow me for the rest of my life. Close enough that it would define me, erase everything I had done before, reduce me to one moment, one accusation, one silence. I stood there as they read it, feeling nothing. No anger. No tears. Just emptiness. Because I had chosen this. I had accepted it. I had traded my truth for something I believed mattered more. And as I walked out of that room for the last time, I told myself it was worth it. I told myself I had done the right thing. I told myself that protecting him, protecting his name, protecting the future of the child I didn't even know I would one day have, was worth losing everything. I believed that. For a long time, I believed that. But standing there now, 30 years later, with my son looking at me like I was a stranger, I wasn't so sure anymore. The house felt different after Ethan left. It wasn't just quiet, it was hollow. Like something essential had been ripped out, leaving behind an empty shell that still looked like home, but no longer felt like one. I stood in the same spot for a long time after the door slammed, staring at the space where he had been just seconds before. I kept expecting to hear his footsteps coming back to see his hand reach for the doorknob again. But nothing came. Just silence and the echo of his words. "I don't even know who you are." That one sentence replayed in my mind over and over again, louder than anything else. I had spent my entire life making sure he would never have to know that part of me. And now, that was the only part he could see. I don't remember deciding to sit down. I just remember suddenly being on the couch, staring at the folder he had left behind, like it was something dangerous. Like it might open itself and spill everything I had tried so hard to contain. My hands rested on my knees, stiff, unmoving. For a moment, I felt nothing. No tears, no anger, just numb. And then it hit me. Not all at once, but in waves. The memory of his face, the way his voice cracked when he asked if it was true, the disappointment in his eyes. I bent forward, pressing my hands against my face as the first sob escaped me. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't quiet. It was raw. 30 years of holding everything and breaking open in one moment. I was trying to protect you, I whispered through tears, though he was no longer there to hear it. That had always been my reason, my justification, my excuse. But sitting there alone, it suddenly didn't feel like enough. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. At some point, I forced myself to stand, to move, to breathe like a normal person again. Because Eve, and though everything inside me felt broken, hours passed. Or maybe it was minutes. Time didn't seem to matter anymore. At some point, I forced myself to stand, to move, to breathe like a normal person again. Because even though everything inside me felt broken, life doesn't stop. It never does. I walked slowly into the hallway, my eyes drifting toward Ethan's old room. I hadn't touched it much over the years. Even after he moved out, I kept it mostly the same. The same bed, the same faded posters on the wall, the same bookshelf filled with things he loved as a child. It had always been my way of holding on to something steady, something certain. But now, even that felt fragile. I pushed the door open. The room smelled faintly of dust and old memories. I stepped inside, running my fingers lightly over the dresser, the desk, the edge of the bed. So much of your life built on a lie, I murmured to myself. And that thought, it cut deeper than anything else. Because no matter how I justified it, I had hidden the truth from him. Not just about the military, but about his father, about Michael, the man I had loved, the man I had lost, the man I had turned into something else entirely just to protect my son. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my eyes drifting to the closet. It was slightly open, just enough for me to see the old storage boxes stacked inside. Boxes I hadn't touched in years, boxes I had avoided for a reason. A long, slow breath left my lungs. Not tonight, I whispered, but my body didn't listen. Because deep down, I already knew something had changed. The past wasn't buried anymore. It was here, and it wasn't going away. I knelt in front of the closet, pushing the door open fully. Dust shifted in the air as I pulled the first box forward. Old clothes, school papers, memories of a life I had tried to keep simple for him. I set it aside and reached for the second box. Heavier, more deliberate, the one I hadn't opened since I moved into this house. My hands hesitated for just a moment before lifting the lid. Inside was everything I had tried to forget. Old photographs, military insignia, documents, and at the very bottom, an envelope, yellowed with age, unopened. My breath caught instantly, because I recognized it, even before I picked it up, even before I saw the name, Colonel James Carter. I had received it years ago, not long after I left the military. I remembered holding it then, just like I was holding it now. I remembered the weight of it, the fear of what it might contain. And I remembered making a decision. Not to open it, because whatever was inside could only make things worse. So I had buried it, just like everything else, forgotten it, or at least tried to. But now, there it was, in my hands again, and this time could only make things worse. So I had buried it, just like everything else, forgotten it, or at least tried to. But now, there it was, in my hands again, and this time I couldn't ignore it. My fingers trembled as I traced the edge of the envelope. "Why now?" I whispered, because it didn't feel like a coincidence. Ethan discovering the truth. The letter resurfacing. Colonel Carter reaching out again after all these years. It felt like something was unfolding, something I could no longer control. I sat back against the closet wall, the envelope resting in my lap. For a long moment, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to put it back, to close the box, to pretend none of this was happening. But that part of me was getting smaller, weaker. Because I had already lost too much. And if there was even a chance that this letter held answers that could help me explain everything to Ethan, then I couldn't turn away anymore. Slowly, carefully, I opened it. The paper inside was crisp, preserved better than I expected. And the moment I began to read, my heart started racing. Bradley. If you're reading this, it means you've reached a point where the truth can't stay buried any longer. There are things you don't know, things I should have told you years ago, and now it may be too late to keep them hidden. I've been trying to find you. We need to talk, not just for you, but for your son. Carter. I stared at the last line. For your son. The same words, the same urgency, the same warning. My hands tightened around the letter, because now I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. This wasn't just about clearing my name. This wasn't just about the past. This was about Ethan, about what he believed, about what he deserved to know. And for the first time in 30 years, I realized something terrifying. The truth I had been protecting him from might be the only thing that could save us now. I must have read the letter 10 times that night. Each time I searched for something I might have missed. A hidden meaning. A detail that would explain why Colonel James Carter had waited decades to reach out to me and why he was doing it now. But the message never changed. The truth can't stay buried any longer. The words echoed in my mind like a warning, or maybe a promise. I sat there on the floor of Ethan's old room, the letter trembling slightly in my hands, and for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. Small. Fragile. But real. Because if Carter was right, if there were things I didn't know, things that could change everything, then maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as powerless as I thought. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face. The hurt, the anger, the disbelief. And underneath it all, something worse. Disappointment. That was the part that broke me. Not that he thought I had done something terrible, but that he believed I had chosen to be that person, that I had lived a lie, that I wasn't who he thought I was. And the truth was, he wasn't entirely wrong. I had hidden things from him, important things, life-defining things, but not because I didn't trust him, not because I didn't love him, but because I loved him too much to let him carry the weight of a truth that could shatter everything he believed about his father and himself. Still, that love had come at a cost, and now I was paying for it. By morning, I had made my decision. I was going to find Colonel Carter. No more waiting. No more hiding. If there was a truth out there that could fix what was breaking between me and my son, I had to face it. Even if it meant reopening wounds I had spent a lifetime trying to close. I walked into the kitchen, the early sunlight filtering softly through the windows. Everything looked the same as it always did. The same table, The same chair Ethan used to sit in, the same quiet stillness. But I felt different, lighter in a strange way, like something inside me had shifted. I poured myself a cup of coffee, though my hands were still unsteady. "You don't get to run anymore," I said quietly to myself. And for once, I meant it. The letter didn't include an address, just his name, but I knew where to start. Men like Carter didn't disappear. Not completely. It took me most of the morning digging through old contacts, making a few careful phone calls, reaching out to people I hadn't spoken to in years. Each conversation felt like reopening a door I had deliberately closed. Each name brought back memories I wasn't sure I was ready to face, but I kept going, because this wasn't just about me anymore. By early afternoon, I had something, an address, a small town about 2 hours outside Columbus. Of course, Carter had always been the type to retreat somewhere quiet, somewhere removed from everything, somewhere like me. I stared at the address written on the piece of paper in front of me. This was it, the moment I had been avoiding for 30 years. And yet, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid. Not entirely. There was fear, yes, but there was something else too. Determination. Because whatever waited for me at the end of that drive, I needed to face it. The road stretched out endlessly in front of me as I drove. Fields, open sky. The kind of quiet landscape that should have been calming. But my mind was anything but calm. Every mile felt like stepping deeper into a part of my life I had abandoned. Or maybe a part of my life that had never really let go of me. I kept thinking about Carter, about the way he had looked during the trial. Silent, watching, like he knew something he couldn't or wouldn't say. Back then, I thought his silence meant he agreed with the outcome, that he believed I was guilty. But now I wasn't so sure. Because if he had truly believed that, why reach out now? Why, after all these years, why mention Ethan? The questions circled endlessly in my mind, until finally I pulled into the driveway. The house was modest, nothing like I expected. A small single-story home surrounded by trees tucked away from the road. Quiet, private, isolated. It felt like the kind of place someone chose when they didn't want to be found. I turned off the engine, but didn't move right away. My hands rested on the steering wheel, gripping it tighter than I realized. This was it. No turning back. No more pretending. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to let it out slowly. "Just go," I whispered. And finally, I stepped out of the car. Each step toward the front door felt heavier than the last, not because I didn't want answers, but because I wasn't sure I was ready for them. I reached the door and paused. For a brief moment, doubt crept in. What if this changes everything? What if the truth is worse than the lie? What if I lose Ethan anyway? My hand hovered over the door. Then I thought of his face again. The hurt, the anger, the distance between us. And I knocked. Once, twice. The sound echoed louder than it should have. Then footsteps. Slow, measured, familiar. The door opened, and there he was. Older, grayer, but unmistakably the same man. Colonel James Carter. He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes softened just slightly. "Bradley," he said. My name sounded different coming from him, like it carried the weight of everything we had never said. "I got your letter," I replied. He nodded, stepping aside. "I was hoping you would." I hesitated for just a second. then stepped inside. And as the door closed behind me, I felt it. That shift again. The past wasn't behind me anymore. It was right in front of me. And this time, there would be no more silence. The inside of Colonel Carter's house was exactly what I expected. Simple, neat, almost too controlled. Every object had its place. Every surface was clean. There were no signs of clutter, no personal touches beyond a few framed military photographs on the wall. It felt less like a home, and more like a place someone stayed in. "Sit," Carter said, gesturing toward a wooden chair at the kitchen table. I didn't argue. I couldn't. My chest was already tight with anticipation, my mind racing ahead of the moment. He poured 2 cups of coffee, placing one in front of me before taking his seat across from me. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched. Heavy, loaded. 30 years of unanswered questions sitting between us. Finally, I broke it. "You said there are things I don't know." I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Start talking." Carter studied me for a long moment, like he was measuring something, like he was deciding how much I was ready to hear. "You've carried this for a long time," he said quietly. "That's not an answer." "No," he admitted, "but it matters." I leaned forward slightly, my hands tightening around the edge of the table. "My son thinks I'm a traitor," I said. "So, whatever you have to say, just say it." That seemed to land. Something shifted in his expression. Regret. That was the first time I saw it. "I should have told you back then," he said. "But I didn't." Why I demanded. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for a folder sitting beside him on the table. Old. Worn. Familiar. My stomach dropped the moment I saw it. He slid it toward me. "I think you should see this first." I hesitated for only a second before opening it. Inside were documents, official reports, classified markings that had long since faded with time, and right on top a report I had never seen before. My name was on it, but the words underneath, they didn't match anything I remembered. My eyes scanned the page quickly, my breath catching as the meaning started to form. Internal breach, confirmed unauthorized access, primary suspect under investigation. My hands began to tremble, because the name listed under that line was not mine. I looked up at Carter, my voice barely holding together. This isn't what they told me." "No," he said quietly. "It's not. Then why?" "Because the investigation didn't end where you think it did." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What are you saying?" I whispered. Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression heavier now. "I'm saying you weren't the one who betrayed your unit." The words hit me like a shockwave. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I had just heard. Because this was the truth I had been waiting for. The truth I had dreamed about. The truth that could have changed everything. And yet, it didn't feel like relief. It felt like something else entirely. Because if it wasn't me, then who did? I asked, my voice shaking now. Carter didn't answer right away. And that hesitation, it scared me more than anything else. "Say it," I insisted. His eyes met mine. And for the first time since I had arrived, I saw something I had never seen in him before. Guilt. "Sergeant Kyle Brennan," he said. The name hit harder than I expected, even though part of me had always suspected it, even though something in me had known. Hearing it out loud made it real. "He was leaking information to the enemy," Carter continued. We found evidence after the trial. Financial transactions, communication logs, patterns that matched every compromised operation. I shook my head slowly, trying to process it. No, that doesn't make sense, I said. If you knew that, why didn't you clear my name? Carter's jaw tightened, because by the time we had proof, it was too late. Too late. The words echoed painfully in my mind. Too late for what I asked. For the official record, he replied. And for you. My chest tightened. That's not good enough, I said, my voice rising. You let me take the fall for something I didn't do. Yes, he said. No defense, no excuse, just the truth. And somehow, that made it worse. Why I demanded. Carter exhaled slowly, his eyes dropping to the table for a moment before returning to me. Because there was something else he said. Something in his tone made my heart pound harder. What I whispered. He leaned forward slightly, his voice quieter now. The night of the ambush, you made a decision. I froze, because I knew exactly what he was talking about. You left your position, he continued. You went back for your men. I was trying to save them, I said. I know, he replied. And you did. I blinked, confused. What Carter's gaze held mine. You saved lives that night, Bradley. The words didn't register at first. They just hung there, floating, disconnected from everything I believed. From everything I believed? That's no to what the report said, I said slowly. No, he agreed. It's not. Then what are you talking about? He reached into the folder again and pulled out another document. Different, more detailed. He placed it in front of me. Read it, what the report said. I said slowly. No, he agreed. It's not. Then what are you talking about? He reached into the folder again and pulled out another document. Different, more detailed. He placed it in front of me. Read it. My hands moved almost automatically, my eyes scanning the page. Casualty reports, survivor statements, accounts of the retreat, and then the line that made everything stop. Lieutenant Whitman's actions resulted in the successful extraction of multiple personnel who would have otherwise been lost. My breath caught. I read it again and again. Each time the words felt more unreal. I saved them, I whispered. Yes, Carter said softly. The room blurred slightly as tears filled my eyes. 30 years. 30 years of believing I had failed, of believing I had caused their deaths, of carrying that weight every single day. And now, you're telling me I didn't destroy that mission. I asked, my voice breaking. Carter shook his head. No, he said. You saved what was left of it. A sob escaped me before I could stop it. Because this was everything I had needed to hear. Everything I had been denied. Everything that could have changed my life. My son, I whispered. He thinks I know, Carter said, and then he said the words that changed everything. You need to tell him the truth. I looked at him, my heart racing again. I can't, I said instinctively. You can. No, I insisted. You don't understand. If I tell him everything, it won't just change what he thinks about me. Carter's expression hardened slightly. It'll change what he thinks about his father. Silence fell between us. Heavy, unavoidable. Because that was the truth I had been running from. The truth I had protected for 30 years. The truth that could destroy my son. Carter leaned closer, his voice firm now. Bradley, Your silence didn't protect him. I swallowed hard. It just gave him the wrong story. The words hit deeper than anything else he had said. Because they were true. Painfully true. And for the first time, I realized something I had been too afraid to admit. The truth I had buried was the only thing that could save us now. I couldn't speak.
Not right away. Carter's words, "You need to tell him the truth," hung in the air between us like something alive, something unavoidable. For 30 years, I had built my life around silence. And now, he was asking me to destroy it. "You don't understand," I said finally, my voice low-strained. "If I tell Ethan everything, I don't just lose him." Carter didn't interrupt, didn't argue. He just watched me. "His father." I continued, my throat tightening. "The man he believes in, the man I told him about his entire life." I stopped, because even saying it out loud felt like betrayal. Not just of Michael, but of the version of him I had protected. Carter leaned forward slightly. "Bradley," he said carefully, "what exactly did you tell your son about Michael Reed?" I let out a shaky breath. "That he was a good man," I said. "That he died a hero. That he never came home." Every word felt heavier now. More fragile. More dangerous. "And that's not true?" Carter asked quietly. I shook my head. I don't know what's true anymore. That was the worst part. For so long, I had convinced myself I understood what happened that night. That I had lost him. That he was gone. But now, everything felt uncertain. Carter sat back, studying me in silence for a moment. Then, he said something that made my entire body go still. He didn't die that night. The world seemed to stop. Completely. My breath caught in my chest, my hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly it hurt. "What did you just say?" I whispered. Carter didn't look away. "Michael Reed didn't die in that ambush." My mind rejected it instantly. "No," I said, shaking my head. "That's not possible. They told me." "They told you what they needed you to believe." Carter interrupted. The words hit harder than anything else he had said so far. Because deep down, a part of me had always questioned it. The lack of a body, the silence, the way everything had been wrapped up too quickly. "You're wrong," I said, but my voice lacked conviction now. "I saw what happened. I was there." Yes, a part of me had always questioned it, the lack of a body. The silence, the way everything had been wrapped up too quickly. "You're wrong," I said, but my voice lacked conviction now. "I saw what happened. I was there." "Yes," Carter said, "but you didn't see everything." My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. "Then tell me," I demanded. "Tell me what I didn't see." Carter exhaled slowly, as if he had been carrying this moment for just as long as I had. "The ambush wasn't just an attack," he said. "It was an extraction." I blinked, confused. "Extraction of what?" "Of someone valuable," he replied. A cold feeling spread through my chest. "Who?" "The ambush wasn't just an attack," he said. "It was an extraction." I blinked, confused. "Extraction of what?" "Of someone valuable," he replied. A cold feeling spread through my chest. Who? Carter didn't answer immediately. And that hesitation, it terrified me. Say it, I insisted. His eyes met mine, steady, unavoidable. Michael Reed. The words didn't make sense, not at first, because they didn't fit into anything I knew, anything I had lived with for 30 years. You're telling me, I said slowly, my voice trembling, that the ambush was about him. Carter nodded. Yes. I shook my head again, harder this time. No. That doesn't make sense. He was one of us. He was more than that, Carter said. And there it was, the shift, the crack in everything I had believed. What does that mean? I asked. Carter leaned forward, his voice lowering. It means Michael Reed wasn't just a soldier in your unit. My stomach dropped. He was under investigation. The room felt smaller suddenly, harder to breathe in. For what? I whispered. Carter's gaze didn't waver. For working with Brennan. The words hit like a physical blow. No, I said immediately. No, that's not true. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. You're wrong, I repeated, my voice rising. Michael would never. Sit down, Carter said firmly. I'm not going to sit here and listen to you rewrite who he was. Bradley. His voice cut through mine, sharp, controlled. Sit down. Something in his tone made me freeze. Not fear, not exactly, but authority. The kind I hadn't felt in years. Slowly, reluctantly, I sat. My chest heaving, my hands shaking. You think I want to believe this? Carter said quietly. You think this was easy to uncover? I didn't respond. Because I couldn't. Michael Reed had access to information he shouldn't have had. He continued. The same information Brennan was leaking. That doesn't mean he was involved, I snapped. No, Carter agreed. It doesn't. Hope flickered for just a second. Then, but it does mean he knew. And just like that, it was gone. The room felt unbearably still. What are you saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper now. I'm saying, Carter replied carefully, that Michael wasn't the one feeding information to the enemy, but he knew who was. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it, trying to find something that fit. If he knew, I said slowly, then why didn't he report it? Carter didn't answer right away. And that silence. It said everything. Why I pressed. His eyes softened slightly. Because he was trying to stop it himself. I blinked, confused again. He was working with intelligence, Carter explained. Off the record, trying to gather enough evidence to expose Brennan without tipping him off. My breath caught. Pieces started to shift. Slowly, painfully. Then the ambush, I said. Was Brennan's way of cleaning it up? Carter finished. Everything went cold. He knew he was being investigated. Carter continued. So he set the trap, leak the convoy route, create chaos, eliminate anyone who could expose him. And Michael, I whispered, was the target. The words echoed in my mind. Loud, unrelenting. He told me to go. I said, suddenly the memo RI crashing back. He made me leave. And Michael, I whispered, was the target. The words echoed in my mind. Loud, unrelenting. He told me to go. I said, suddenly the memory crashing back. He made me leave. Carter nodded. Yes, he knew. Yes. Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they felt different. Sharper, more painful. He knew he wasn't coming back, I said. He knew Brennan wouldn't let him. My hands curled into fists. And you're telling me he didn't die? Carter hesitated, just for a moment. Then he said, he was taken. My heart stopped. What? The enemy didn't kill him, Carter said. They extracted him. Why? Because he was valuable. The same word again, and this time it made sense. Too much sense. I leaned back in my chair, my entire body feeling numb. He's alive, I whispered. Carter didn't answer right away. And that silence, it was the cruelest part. We don't know, he said finally. Not yes, not no, just uncertainty. And somehow that hurt more than anything else. Because for 30 years, I had grieved a man I believed was dead, and now I didn't even know if that grief had been real, or if it had just been incomplete. But Ethan, I said suddenly, my voice breaking, if this is true, if Michael wasn't who I thought he was? Carter's expression softened again. This isn't about who he was, he said. It's about what really happened. I shook my head slowly. No, I whispered. It's about who Ethan believes his father is. And for the first time since I walked into that house, I realized the full weight of the truth. Because this wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This wasn't just about justice. This was about rewriting an entire life. My son's life. And the question that terrified me the most wasn't whether I could tell him the truth. It was what that truth would take from him. I didn't remember driving back, not clearly. The road blurred into something distant mechanical, just movement, just time, passing, just space between who I was and who I was about to become. Because everything Carter had told me, it didn't just change the past, it changed what I had to do next. And that was the part that terrified me. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun was already low, casting long shadows across the yard. The house looked the same as always, quiet, still, waiting. But I knew nothing inside it was the same anymore. I sat in the car for a long moment staring at the front door. That door had always been a boundary, a place where I could leave everything outside. The war, the accusations, the guilt, and step into something simpler, safer. A life I built for Ethan, but now there was no separation anymore. The truth had followed me home, and it wasn't going anywhere. Inside, the silence hit me again. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was heavy, full of everything I hadn't said, everything I had hidden, everything that was about to come crashing down. I walked slowly into the living room, my eyes drifting to the spot where Ethan had stood, angry, hurt, looking at me like I was someone he didn't recognize. I can fix this, I whispered, but even as I said it, I didn't know if it was true. Because fixing something means putting it back the way it was. And after today, there was no going back. Only forward. Only truth. I sat down and let the silence settle around me. For years, I had told myself I was strong, that I could carry this, that I could live with it. But strength isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about letting go. And that was the part I had never learned. Letting go of control. Letting go of the story I created. Letting go of the version of Michael I had preserved for Ethan. A version that wasn't entirely false, but wasn't entirely true either. He was a good man. He did try to do the right thing, but he wasn't perfect. And neither was I. And maybe that was the truth Ethan deserved. Not heroes, not villains, just people. Flawed, complicated, human. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my phone. I stared at Ethan's name on the screen. Just one call. That's all it would take. One call to change everything. My thumb hovered over the button, and for a moment, fear took over. What if he doesn't answer? What if he doesn't want to hear it? What if just one call? That's all it would take. One call to change everything. My thumb hovered over the button, and for a moment, fear took over. What if he doesn't answer? What if he doesn't want to hear it? What if this pushes him even further away? I closed my eyes, took a slow breath, and remembered something Carter said. Your silence didn't protect him. It just gave him the wrong story. I pressed the call button. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Each ring felt louder than the last. Then voicemail. I froze. The silence on the other end felt heavier than anything else. I could hang up. Wait, try again later. But I knew if I didn't do this now, I might never do it. Ethan, I said, my voice unsteady but clear. It's me. I swallowed hard. I know you don't want to hear from me right now, and I understand that. That part hurt more than I expected. But there are things you need to know, I continued. Not excuses, not explanations, just the truth. My voice faltered slightly. I should have told you a long time ago. I paused, searching for the right words. There weren't any, not perfect ones, not safe ones. Your father, I said slowly. Michael Reed, he wasn't who I told you he was. The silence on the other end felt suffocating. But he wasn't who you think he is either. I closed my eyes, letting the words settle. He didn't betray anyone. He was trying to stop it. My grip tightened on the phone. And I need you to hear the rest of it, from me, not from reports, not from assumptions. I hesitated, then forced myself to finish. Please, he didn't betray anyone. He was trying to stop it. My grip tightened on the phone. And I need you to hear the rest of it, from me, not from reports, not from assumptions. I hesitated, then forced myself to finish. Please, just meet me. I ended the call before I could lose my nerve. And just like that, there was no going back. The waiting was worse than anything. Worse than the trial. Worse than the accusations. Because this time, I didn't have control. I couldn't defend myself. I couldn't explain everything in a room where people were required to listen. This was different. This was personal. And Ethan, he didn't owe me anything. Not anymore. Minutes passed, then an hour, then another, each second stretching longer than the last. I paced the living room, my thoughts spiraling. What if he never calls back? What if he cuts me out completely? What if my phone buzzed? I froze. For a second, I just stared at it, afraid to look, afraid of what I might see. Then I picked it up. A message. From Ethan. 3 simple words. Where are you? My breath caught. Relief hit me so suddenly it almost made my knees give out. I typed back quickly. At home. The response came almost immediately. I'm coming. And just like that. Everything changed again. I stood by the window as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky fading into shades of dark blue and gray. My heart was pounding. Not from fear, not exactly, but from something deeper. This was it. The moment I had avoided for 30 years. The moment where truth would replace silence, where everything would be laid bare. I heard the car pull into the driveway, the engine shutting off, the door opening, footsteps, slow, deliberate, closer. I didn't move. I couldn't. The front door opened, and there he was, Ethan. He looked the same, but also completely different, like something inside him had shifted, just like it had in me. For a moment, we just stood there, looking at each other. No anger, no shouting, just tension. Unspoken, heavy. Finally, he broke the silence. "You said you were going to tell me the truth," he said. His voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Something fragile. Something waiting. I nodded slowly. "Yes." He took a step closer. "Then start talking." And this time, I didn't look away. Ethan didn't sit down. He stood just inside the living room, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, like he was holding himself together. Or maybe holding himself back. From anger. From walking out again. From something worse. "You said you were going to tell me the truth," he repeated. His voice was calm. Too calm. And that scared me more than if he had been shouting. Because calm meant distance. It meant he was already halfway gone. "I am," I said, softly. I gestured toward the couch. "Please sit." He hesitated, just for a second. Then he walked over and sat down, but not close. Not beside me. He chose the far end of the couch, leaving space between us. That space. It felt wider than anything I had ever known. I sat slowly, my hands resting in my lap, trying to steady them. For a moment, I didn't know where to begin. Because there wasn't just one truth. There were layers, pieces, things that had to be said in the right order, or nothing would make sense. Ethan's voice cut through my thoughts. "Start with this," he said. "Did you betray your unit?" Straight to it, no hesitation. I met his eyes. No. The word was simple, clear, certain, but he didn't react. Not yet, because he didn't trust it. "Then why does every record say you did?" he asked. "Because I let it," I replied. That finally got a reaction, a flicker of confusion. "Why would you do that?" he demanded. I took a slow breath. "Because telling the truth would have hurt you," I said. His expression hardened immediately. "That doesn't make any sense." "I know," I said quietly. It didn't make sense to me either back then. "Then explain it," he snapped. And there it was, the anger, still there, still alive. But underneath it, something else. He wanted to understand. That was enough. "That mission," I began slowly. "The one everything is based on. It wasn't what they said it was." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his eyes fixed on me. "Then what was it?" "It was a setup," I said. He frowned. "A setup?" "Yes." I swallowed, my throat tightening as I continued. "There was someone in our unit leaking information, feeding our movements, our routes, everything to the enemy." Ethan's expression shifted again. Less anger, more focus. "And they thought it was you," he said. "Yes. But it wasn't." "No." He studied me carefully. Then who was it? I hesitated, just for a moment, because saying the name out loud again still carried weight. Kyle Brennan, I said. Ethan blinked. The one who testified against you? Yes. That doesn't make sense, he said immediately. Why would he accuse you if he was the one to protect himself? I interrupted gently. And because I made it easy for him. Ethan shook his head. I don't understand. I know, I said. I didn't either, not at first. I leaned back slightly, letting the memories come. That night before the mission, I started noticing things. Patterns that didn't add up. Information that didn't stay where it was supposed to. You suspected him. That night before the mission, I started noticing things. Patterns that didn't add up. Information that didn't stay where it was supposed to. You suspected him? Ethan asked. Yes. Then why didn't you report it? Because I wasn't sure. Because I needed proof. Because someone else was already trying to handle it. I looked at Ethan, my chest tightening. Your father knew. The words landed differently this time. He didn't react immediately, but I saw it. The shift. What do you mean he knew? He asked slowly. He knew Brennan was leaking information, I said, and he was trying to expose him. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not what you told me. I know. Why not? What do you mean he knew? He asked slowly. He knew Brennan was leaking information, I said, and he was trying to expose him. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. That's not what you told me. I know. Why not? Because the rest of it was where everything broke, because I didn't know the whole truth. I said honestly, not then. Ethan leaned forward again, his voice sharper now. Then what do you know? I took a breath and stepped into the part I had feared the most. The ambush, I said. It wasn't random. He froze. It was planned, I continued. Brennan set it up. To kill your unit? Ethan asked. To cover himself, I replied, and to eliminate anyone who could expose him. Ethan's jaw tightened. And my father? He asked. I held his gaze. He was the target. Silence. Heavy. Unmoving. Ethan's breathing slowed like he was trying to process it. That doesn't make sense, he said after a moment. If Brennan wanted to silence him, then why not just kill him? Because that's what I believed for 30 years. Because that's what I told myself. Because it was easier than the truth. He didn't die that night, I said. Ethan's head snapped up. What? The word came out sharp, uncontrolled. He didn't die in the ambush, I repeated. That's not. Ethan shook his head. That's not possible. You told me. I know what I told you, I said, my voice breaking slightly. And I believed it. You believed it, he demanded. Yes. Then why are you saying this now? Because everything I knew was wrong. Because I was lied to. Because I chose not to look deeper. Because I found out the truth, I said quietly. Ethan stared at me, and the truth is what he pressed. I forced myself to say it. He was taken. The room went still. Taken, Ethan repeated. Yes, by who? The same people Brendan was feeding information to. Ethan stood abruptly, pacing a few steps before turning back to me. You're telling me my father didn't die? He said. That he was kidnapped, and no one told you. That's what I'm telling you. And you're just finding this out now? He asked. Yes. He laughed once, short, disbelieving. That's insane. I know, I whispered. He ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven now. And you expect me to believe this? He asked. I expect you to listen, I said gently. That's all. He stopped pacing, looked at me again, and for the first time since he walked in, the anger wasn't the strongest thing in his eyes. It was confusion, fear. Then why didn't you tell me any of this before, he asked, his voice quieter now? And there it was, the question I had been avoiding my entire life. I swallowed hard.
Because I didn't know how to tell you the truth without breaking you, I said. Ethan's expression softened slightly. But you still lied, he said. Yes. About everything. About the parts I thought would hurt you the most, I corrected. He shook his head. That's not your decision to make. I know that now, I said, softly. Silence settled between us again. But it felt different this time. Less sharp, less final. Ethan looked down at the floor for a long moment, then back at me. So, what happens now? He asked. And for the first time since all of this began, I had an answer. Now, I said, my voice steady, we find out what really happened. Ethan didn't say anything after that. Not right away. He just stood there, staring at me like he was trying to decide whether to believe what he had just heard or walk away from it entirely. I need proof, he said finally. His voice wasn't angry anymore. It was something else. Careful, guarded, like he was standing on the edge of something and didn't trust the ground beneath him. I know, I said. And not just documents, he added quickly. Not reports written 30 years ago by people who got it wrong the first time. That's fair. He studied me for a moment, then asked quietly, Can we actually find out what happened? That question? It carried more weight than anything else, because it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about whether we could rebuild something in the present. Yes, I said. We can. I wasn't completely sure, but I knew where to start. 2 days later, we were sitting in the same kitchen where I had once sat across from Colonel Carter. But this time, Ethan was beside me. Not across, not distant, still guarded, still unsure, but present. And that was enough. Carter looked between us, his expression unreadable at first. Then he nodded once. So, you told him, he said. I did, I replied. Ethan leaned forward slightly. And now I want to hear it from you, he said. Everything. Carter's eyes shifted to him, studying him carefully. You're Michael's son, he said. It wasn't a question. Ethan nodded. Yes. Carter exhaled slowly as if preparing himself. Then you deserve the truth. And just like that, we began. Carter laid out everything. The investigation into Brennan, the financial trails, the communications that had been intercepted but not in time, the suspicion that had grown around him too slowly. Too late. Ethan listened without interrupting. Every now and then I saw his hands tighten, his jaw clench, but he didn't look away. And my father? Ethan asked when Carter paused. Carter nodded. He was working with intelligence, he said, unofficially, trying to gather enough evidence to expose Brennan without alerting him. Ethan frowned. So he was. Undercover. In a way, Carter replied, but without the protection of it being official. That sounds reckless, Ethan said. It was, Carter admitted, but he believed it was the only way. I felt something tighten in my chest at that. That sounded exactly like Michael. Too willing to carry something alone, too determined to do what he thought was right no matter the cost. He didn't tell you? Ethan asked, glancing at me. I shook my head. No. Ethan looked back at Carter. So the ambush was meant to stop him? Yes. And Brennan planned it? Yes.
Ethan leaned back slightly, processing. And you're saying my father didn't die? He said slowly. That he was taken. Carter's expression shifted slightly. Careful again. We believe so, he said. Believe? Ethan pressed. There were no confirmed remains, Carter explained. But there was evidence, movement after the attack. Communication logs that indicated a high-value extraction, and you think that was him? Yes. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then, is he alive? The question landed like a weight alive. The question landed like a weight in the room. Carter didn't answer immediately. Because he couldn't. We don't know, he said finally. Ethan looked down at his hands. I could see it. The conflict. Hope trying to rise in the room. Carter didn't answer immediately, because he couldn't. We don't know, he said finally. Ethan looked down at his hands. I could see it. The conflict. Hope trying to rise, and fear pushing it back down. 30 years? He murmured, and no one looked for him. We did, Carter said. For a while. That's not good enough. Ethan snapped, his voice rising again. I agree, Carter said quietly. That caught Ethan off guard. You agree, he repeated. Yes. Silence followed. Then Carter reached for another file, this one thinner, more recent. I didn't stop looking, he said. My heart skipped. What I asked. Carter slid the file across the table. I couldn't fix what happened back then, he continued. But I could keep asking questions. Ethan opened the file slowly. Inside were reports, not old ones, recent. Dates from the past few years, investigations, cross-references, mentions of locations. Wait! Ethan said, his brow furrowing. These are new. Yes, you've been tracking something I said. Carter nodded. A name started showing up in intelligence circles, he said. A man with no confirmed identity, no official records, but consistent patterns. Ethan looked up. What kind of patterns? Military training, Carter replied. Tactical behavior, familiar operational methods. My heart started racing, familiar to who I asked. Carter's eyes met mine. To your unit. Military training, Carter replied. Tactical behavior, familiar operational methods. My heart started racing. Familiar to who? I asked. Carter's eyes met mine. To your unit. The air seemed to leave the room. You think? I whispered. I think. Carter said carefully. There's a possibility Michael Reed survived. Ethan's hand tightened on the file. And you didn't tell anyone he asked. I tried, Carter said. But without confirmation, it's just speculation. Ethan looked back down at the documents. There's a location here, he said. Carter nodded. Yes. Where is it? Carter hesitated for just a moment. Then, Arizona. Ethan looked up sharply. Arizona. A small region near the border, Carter said. Unstable, difficult to track. But there have been sightings. My mind raced. Arizona. Alive. 30 years. It felt impossible, and yet it was the first real lead we had. Ethan stood suddenly. We're going, he said. I blinked. What we're going to find him, Ethan repeated. Ethan, if there's even a chance he's alive, I'm not sitting here doing nothing, he said. I looked at Carter. He didn't stop him, didn't discourage him. He just watched. Then he said something that changed everything again. You won't be going alone. Ethan frowned. What does that mean? Carter stood slowly. It means, he said, if Brennan is still out there, this isn't over. The room went still, because we all understood what that meant. This wasn't just about the past anymore. This wasn't just about truth. This was about something that had never been finished. Something that had been waiting for 30 years. And now we were walking straight into it. The desert air in Arizona felt nothing like the one I remembered from 30 years ago. Back then, it had been suffocating, filled with tension danger, the constant awareness that something could go wrong at any moment. Now it was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that made every sound feel amplified, every step, every breath, every heartbeat. Ethan stood beside me as we looked out over the stretch of dry land. Carter had brought us to an isolated area just beyond a forgotten road surrounded by rocky hills and sparse vegetation. This is it, Ethan asked. His voice was low, cautious. Carter nodded. This is where the signals have been coming from, he said. Intermittent, careful. Someone who knows how not to be found. My chest tightened. Michael? I whispered. Carter didn't answer, because none of us knew for sure, but we all felt it. We were close. We moved slowly, carefully. Not like soldiers anymore, but not like civilians either. Something in us had shifted the moment we stepped into that place. Old instincts, old fears, old awareness. Ethan walked slightly ahead, his eyes scanning the area, his movement sharper than I had ever seen before. For a moment, I didn't see my son. I saw someone else. Someone who carried the same quiet determination I had once seen in Michael. And that thought, it made everything heavier. Stay close, Carter said quietly. We followed a narrow path that led toward a small structure barely visible in the distance. It looked abandoned, worn down by time and weather. But as we got closer, I felt it. That same instinct I had felt years ago. Something wasn't right. Stop, I said suddenly. Ethan froze. What is it? He asked. I didn't answer right away. I just listened. And then I heard it. A faint sound. Movement. Inside. Carter's posture shifted instantly. He's here, he murmured. My heart started pounding. Harder than it had in years. Every step toward that building felt like stepping deeper into the past. Into something unfinished. Something waiting. Ethan reached the door first. He hesitated. Just for a second, then pushed it open. The inside was dim, dusty, but not empty, and not abandoned. There were signs of life, recent ones, a chair, a table, supplies, and then a voice. Didn't think it would take you this long? The sound froze me in place, because I knew that voice. Even after 30 years, I knew it. Ethan turned sharply. Who's there? He demanded. The man stepped out of the shadows slowly. Older, weathered, but unmistakable. Kyle Brennan. My entire body went cold. You, I whispered. He smiled slightly. Not warm, not friendly, just satisfied. Lieutenant Whitman, he said. Still alive after all this time. Ethan stepped forward immediately. You're Brennan H.E., said his voice tight. That depends? He smiled slightly. Not warm, not friendly, just satisfied. Lieutenant Whitman? He said. Still alive after all this time. Ethan stepped forward immediately. You're Brennan, he said, his voice tight. That depends, Brennan replied casually. Who's asking? My name is Ethan Reed, he said, Michael Reed's son. For a moment, something flickered in Brennan's eyes. Recognition, then amusement. Well, he said, this just got interesting. Carter moved forward. It's over, Brennan, he said firmly. We know everything. Brennan chuckled softly. No, he said. You know what you think you know. My hands curled into fists. You betrayed your unit, I said. You set that ambush. Brennan tilted his head slightly. Did I? He said. Yes, Carter snapped. We have the records, the transactions, the communications. And none of it mattered 30 years ago, Brennan interrupted. Why would it matter now? Because this wasn't about the military anymore. This wasn't about official records. This was about truth and closure. You destroyed lives, I said, my voice shaking now. Not with fear, but with anger. You let them blame me. Brennan's expression didn't change. You let them blame you, he corrected. The words hit harder than I expected. Because they were true. Painfully true. Ethan stepped closer, his voice rising. What did you do to my father? He demanded. That question, it changed everything. Because for the first time, Brennan didn't smile. He just looked at Ethan, studied him. You really don't know? H studied him. You really don't know, I said, quietly. Then tell me, Ethan shouted. Silence filled the room, heavy, tense, and then Brennan spoke. He was smarter than I expected, he said. Your father. My breath caught. He figured it out before anyone else, he said, quietly. Then tell me, Ethan shouted. Silence filled the room, heavy, tense, and then Brennan spoke. He was smarter than I expected, he said. Your father. My breath caught. He figured it out before anyone else. Brennan continued. Knew what I was doing. Tried to stop it. Ethan's hands clenched. So you had him killed? Brennan shook his head slowly. No. The word echoed. I didn't kill him, he said. Then where is he? I demanded. Brennan looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time there was something different in his expression. Not guilt, not regret, but something close to it. He made a choice, Brennan said. My heart stopped. What kind of choice? I whispered. The kind you made, he replied. Confusion hit me instantly. What are you talking about? He chose to disappear, Brennan said. The words didn't make sense, not at first. No, I said. That's not possible. He knew I couldn't let him go back, Brennan continued. Not with what he knew. Ethan shook his head. Not with what he knew. Ethan shook his head. You're lying. I'm not, Brennan said calmly. I gave him an option. My chest tightened. What option? I asked. Brennan's gaze stayed on mine. Disappear or watch everything burn. The room went still. Because we all understood what that meant. He chose to protect you, Brennan said. My vision blurred. No, I whispered. Yes, Brennan said. Just like you did. Ethan turned to me slowly. Mom, he said. I couldn't look at him because the truth was crashing into place, piece by piece. Michael hadn't just been taken. He had chosen to vanish, to protect us, to protect Ethan, just like I had chosen silence. Where is he? Ethan asked again, his voice breaking now. Brennan hesitated, just for a moment. Then, I don't know, he said. Don't lie to me, Ethan shouted. I'm not, Brennan replied. He disappeared after that, changed identities, covered his tracks. Carter stepped forward. You expect us to believe you lost track of him? I don't know, he said. Don't lie to me, Ethan shouted. I'm not, Brennan replied. He disappeared after that, changed identities, covered his tracks. Carter stepped forward. You expect us to believe you lost track of him? Brennan let out a quiet breath. I expect you to understand that some people don't want to be found, he said. Silence. Heavy. Unbearable. Because deep down, we all knew that could be true. And that was the hardest part. Ethan stood there, his entire body tense, his world shifting again. So that's it, he said. He's just gone. No one answered. Because the just gone, no one answered. Because the was no answer. Not a clear one. Not a clean one. Just truth. Messy. Incomplete. Painful. But real. And for the first time in 30 years, there were no more lies. The drive back from Arizona Felter was no answer. Not a clear one. Not a clean one. Just truth. Messy. Incomplete. Painful. But real. And for the first time in 30 years, there were no more lies. The drive back from Arizona felt different, not because we had found everything, but because for the first time in 30 years, there was nothing left hidden. No lies. No silence. No version of the story that needed to be protected. Just truth. Messy. Incomplete. But real. And somehow, that made it easier to breathe. Ethan didn't speak much during the drive. He sat beside me staring out the window, his expression distant, but not closed. Not like before. Not like the night he walked out of my house. There was still pain in his eyes, still confusion, but something else had taken its place too. Understanding, or at least the beginning of it. You really believed he was dead? He said quietly at one point. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Yes, and you carried that for 30 years. Yes. He let out a slow breath. I thought you were hiding something because you were guilty, he admitted. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel slightly. I know, but you were hiding something because you were protecting him, he said. I glanced at him briefly. And you, I added. He didn't respond right away. Then, that's what I don't understand, he said. Why protect him if he left? The question hung in the air, heavy, honest, and harder than anything else he had asked. Because leaving doesn't always mean abandoning, I said softly. He frowned slightly. What does it mean then? I thought about Michael, about the look in his eyes that night, the urgency, the way he told me to go, the way he asked me to trust him. It means choosing something that hurts because it protects the people you love, I said. Ethan looked down at his hands. That's what you did too, he said. Yes. And it cost you everything. I swallowed. Yes. Silence followed. But this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was processing, healing, slow, but real. When we got back to the house, the sun was just beginning to set. The same house, the same door, the same place where everything had started to fall apart, and now the place where something new had to begin. Ethan stood in the doorway for a moment, looking around like he was seeing it differently, like it wasn't just a home anymore, but a place filled with history, with truth, with things he was only now beginning to understand. "I used to think everything here was simple," he said quietly. I gave a small, sad smile. I tried to make it that way. He looked at me. "I know. That was new. That understanding. That shift. And it meant more than anything else." We sat down in the living room, the same place where we had argued just days before. But this time, there was no anger, no distance, just two people trying to figure out what came next. "So what now?" Ethan asked. I took a breath. "We keep living," I said. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "That's it." "It has to be," I replied. "We may never find him. We may never get all the answers." That was the hardest truth of all, the one without closure. "But we have enough now to understand," I continued. "And sometimes that has to be enough." Ethan leaned back slightly, thinking. "I don't know if I'm there yet," he admitted. "That's okay," I said gently. "You don't have to be." He looked at me again, and this time, there was something I hadn't seen in his eyes since all of this began. Trust, not complete, not fully restored, but there. "I believe you," he said. The words hit me harder than anything else, because that was all I had wanted. Not forgiveness, not immediate healing, just belief. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded slightly. "Then, you should have told me sooner," he added. I smiled faintly. "I know." But he hesitated. And for a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be. "I think I understand why you didn't." My chest tightened. "Doesn't make it right," he continued. "But I get it. That was more than I deserved, more than I expected, and more than I could ever ask for." Later that night, after Ethan went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet again, but not empty, not hollow, just still, peaceful. For the first time in a long time. I looked around at the life I had built, the one I thought was based on silence, on hiding, on sacrifice. But now I know that silence is not the same as silencence, on hiding, on sacrifice. But now I saw it differently. It wasn't just what I had hidden. It was what I had protected, what I had preserved, what I had loved, and despite everything, that part had never been a lie. I reached for the old folder one last time, the reports, the accusations, the weight of a past that had defined me for so long. And slowly I closed it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't own me anymore. For 30 years, I had lived in the shadow of a story that wasn't fully true. Now, I was finally stepping out of it. Before I went to bed, I paused outside Ethan's door. I didn't knock. I didn't go in. I just stood there for a moment, listening, knowing that things weren't perfect, that they might never be, but also knowing we had found our way back to something real, and that was enough. For now, the past doesn't disappear. It doesn't fade just because we want it to. It stays. It waits. And sometimes it comes back when we least expect it. But the truth, no matter how painful, has a way of setting things right. Not by erasing what happened, but by giving it meaning. And in the end, that meaning is what allows us to move forward, together. Life has a way of testing us in the most unexpected moments. Sometimes the hardest decisions we make are not between right and wrong, but between two forms of pain. Protecting someone we love can mean carrying burdens they may never see, and for a while, it might even feel like the right thing to do. But silence, even when it comes from love, can create distance. It can build walls where there should have been understanding. This story reminds us that truth, no matter how late it comes, is still powerful. It may break illusions, but it also builds something stronger in their place: trust, clarity, and real connection. Bradley didn't lose everything. She found something deeper than the life she had tried to control. She found honesty, and through it, she found her way back to her son. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. It's never too late to tell the truth. It's never too late to rebuild, and it's never too late to be understood. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever kept a secret to protect someone you love? Do you think Bradley made the right choice? Leave a comment and share where you're watching from. It means more than you know. And if you believe in stories that heal, don't forget to like and subscribe. You're not alone in what you feel.